Welcome to another Office Revenge Hub. Enjoy the story.
My entire team quit with me in one day, and the company lost $12 million because of it. My name is Jessica Torres, and for 7 years I was the engineering manager at Dataflow Systems, a fintech company in Boston. I wasn't just managing engineers, I was leading the team that built the core platform, generating 90% of the company's revenue. I hired every person on that team. I trained them. I mentored them. I fought for their salaries and promotions. We weren't just co-workers. We were a unit that functioned like a precision machine. When I started at Dataflow, the engineering department was a disaster. The previous manager had just been fired for missing deadlines on a critical client project. The codebase was a mess. Documentation was non-existent. The team was demoralized and burned out. The CEO, a guy named Philip Westbrook, hired me to fix everything. He said he needed someone who could actually lead, someone who understood both the technical work and how to build a team culture. I told him I could do it, but I'd need authority to make real changes. He said I'd have complete autonomy over engineering, hiring decisions, architecture decisions, process decisions, all mine. That autonomy was why I took the job. I spent my first month just listening. I met with every engineer individually. I asked what was broken, what they needed, what would make them want to stay. The answers were consistent. They needed clear priorities. They needed modern tools. They needed to feel like their work mattered. I started making changes immediately. I rebuilt our development workflow. I fought finance to get budget for better infrastructure. I created a transparent roadmap so everyone understood what we were building and why. But the biggest change was culture. I made it clear that my team's well-being mattered more than arbitrary deadlines. No more all-nighters to fix problems that bad planning had created. No more weekend emergencies unless something was genuinely critical. I told them we'd do excellent work on a sustainable schedule. Period. Some people didn't believe me at first. They'd been burned too many times by managers who made promises they didn't keep. But I followed through. When Philip asked my team to work a weekend to impress a potential investor, I said no. We'd hit our commitments during normal business hours. If that wasn't good enough, that was a leadership problem, not an engineering problem. Philip was surprised, but he backed down. My team noticed. They started trusting me. Over the next 2 years, I hired 6 more engineers. I was selective. I didn't just look for technical skills. I looked for people who were collaborative, curious, and genuinely cared about doing good work. I brought in Raj, a back-end specialist who'd been stuck in a corporate job that wasted his talents. I hired Maya, a front-end developer who was brilliant but had been told she wasn't senior enough at her previous company. I recruited Devon, a systems architect who'd left the industry after a brutal startup experience. Each person I hired, I told them the same thing. I'd fight for them. I'd protect their time. I'd make sure they had the resources to do their best work. But I also expected excellence. They delivered. Within 3 years, my team had rebuilt Dataflow's entire platform. We modernized the architecture. We improved performance by 300%. We built features that directly drove revenue growth. Dataflow went from $15 million in annual revenue to $60 million. Our platform was the reason. Philip loved telling investors about our engineering team. He'd brag about how we shipped faster than companies twice our size, how our uptime was better than industry standards, how clients trusted our technology. He just never mentioned that all of that was because of the team I'd built and the culture I'd protected. My engineers were loyal to me because I was loyal to them. When Raj's father got sick and he needed to work remotely for 3 months, I made it happen without question. When Maya was being recruited by a larger company, I went to Philip and got her a 20% raise to keep her. When Devon was struggling with burnout, I redistributed his workload and gave him 2 weeks off to recover. I took care of my people. They knew it. We had team lunches every Friday where we'd talk about anything except work. We celebrated wins together. We supported each other through challenges. It wasn't just a team, it was a community. By year 5, we'd grown to 12 engineers. Every single one of them had been personally recruited or trained by me. They trusted my judgment. They believed in our mission. We were building something that mattered, and we were doing it the right way. Then Philip hired a new chief operating officer. Her name was Stephanie Chen, and she came from a large tech company with a reputation for aggressive growth tactics. Philip brought her in to help data flow scale faster. He wanted to double revenue again in the next 18 months. Stephanie's first week, she scheduled one-on-one meetings with every department head. When we met, she spent most of the time asking about team productivity metrics. How many story points did we complete per sprint? What was our deployment frequency? How did our velocity compare to industry benchmarks? I explained that we didn't optimize for velocity. We optimized for sustainable delivery of high-quality features that actually solved customer problems. Stephanie smiled in that way executives do when they think you're naive. She said that approach might have worked when data flow was small, but we needed to think differently at our current scale. I asked what she meant. She said engineering teams at high-growth companies operate with urgency. They move fast. They ship constantly. They treat every sprint like it matters. I said my team did treat every sprint like it mattered. That's why we rarely shipped bugs and maintained a 99.9% uptime. Stephanie said those were good metrics, but we were leaving opportunity on the table. We should be shipping twice as much. I asked if she had looked at our backlog. We were already shipping everything that had clear customer value. Doubling output would mean building features just to hit arbitrary metrics. Stephanie said I was thinking too small. We needed to be more ambitious. That conversation should have been a warning sign. Over the next month, Stephanie started implementing changes. She introduced new reporting requirements. She wanted daily stand-ups with written summaries sent to leadership. She wanted detailed time tracking for every task. My team hated it. They'd gone from focusing on their work to spending hours each week on administrative overhead. I pushed back. I told Stephanie these processes were counterproductive. They were slowing us down and frustrating people who'd been thriving under our previous system. Stephanie said transparency and accountability were essential at scale. If my team couldn't handle basic reporting, maybe they weren't ready for the next level. I felt my chest tighten. She was questioning my team's capabilities because they didn't want to waste time on bureaucratic nonsense. I went to Philip. I explained what was happening. I said Stephanie's changes were actively harming the team that had built the company's success. Philip said I needed to be more flexible. Thus, Stephanie had experience scaling companies. I should trust her process. I said I'd built the engineering team from scratch. I knew what they needed to be effective, and it wasn't micromanagement. Philip told me to give it a chance, see how things evolved. I left that meeting feeling uneasy. Things got worse quickly. Stephanie started attending our sprint planning meetings. She'd question our estimates. She'd push us to commit to more work than we could realistically deliver. When I explained why certain estimates were what they were, she'd suggest we were being too conservative, too slow, not hungry enough. My team started coming to me privately. They were stressed. They felt like they were being set up to fail. Maya said she'd been approached by the recruiter from that company she'd almost left for years ago. She wanted to know if things at Dataflow were going to get better. I told her I was fighting for the team. I hoped things would improve, but I wasn't sure I believed it. 3 months after Stephanie joined, she presented a reorganization plan to the executive team. She wanted to split my engineering team into 3 separate units, each reporting to a different manager. She said it would create better accountability and specialization. I said it would destroy the cohesion we'd spent years building. My team worked so well together because they understood the entire system. Splitting them up would create silos and communication overhead. Stephanie said my attachment to the current structure was emotional, not rational. This was about what was best for the company. Philip supported her plan. I was told the reorganization would happen in 30 days. I'd still be a manager, but I'd only oversee one of the 3 teams, 4 engineers instead of 12. The other 8 people I'd hired and trained would report to manager Stephanie was bringing in from outside. I asked who these new managers were. Stephanie said she was recruiting them, people with experience at larger, faster-moving companies, people who wouldn't question her approach. I went home that night and cried. 7 years of building something I was proud of, and it was being dismantled by someone who'd been there for 3 months. My partner asked if I was going to quit. I said I didn't know. I didn't want to abandon my team, but I also couldn't stay and watch everything we'd built get destroyed. I decided to talk to my team first. I called an off-site meeting at a coffee shop on Saturday. All 12 of my engineers showed up. I told them the truth. The company was reorganizing. Most of them would be reassigned to new managers. I'd only be directly managing 4 people going forward. The room went silent. Then Raj asked the question I'd been dreading. Was I leaving? I said I didn't know. I was considering it. But I wanted them to know what was happening so they could make their own decisions. Devon said if I left, he was leaving too. He'd joined Dataflow because of me. If I wasn't leading engineering, there was no reason for him to stay. Maya agreed. She said she'd stayed through multiple recruiting attempts because she believed in our team. Without that team, Dataflow was just another company. One by one, every person in that room said the same thing. So they weren't loyal to Dataflow. They were loyal to me and to each other. If I left, they'd leave too. I tried to talk them out of it. I said they had careers to think about, families, mortgages. They shouldn't make impulsive decisions based on what I did. Raj cut me off. He said this wasn't impulsive. We'd all watched Stephanie try to change a team culture that had been working perfectly. We'd all seen management choose processes over people. If I was leaving, it was because the company had made it impossible for me to do my job well. And if that was the case, none of them wanted to stay either. I went home and thought about it all weekend. I'd never intended to take the whole team with me. I'd never wanted to hurt Dataflow like that. But I also realized my team was right. We'd built something special together. And that something was being destroyed by people who didn't understand it. Monday morning, I walked into Philip's office and resigned. 2 weeks' notice, professional and clean. Philip was shocked. He asked why. I said I couldn't support the reorganization. I'd built the engineering team with a specific culture and approach. Stephanie's changes were incompatible with that. Rather than fight it, I was choosing to step away. Philip said I was being dramatic. I was taking this too personally. I said maybe I was. But that didn't change my decision. Philip asked me to reconsider. He offered me a raise. He said we could discuss the reorganization timeline. I said the timeline wasn't the issue. The issue was that leadership didn't trust the team that had built the company's success. I couldn't stay in that environment. Philip's face went hard. He said I was being unprofessional, abandoning my responsibilities. I said I was giving 2 weeks' notice and would document everything thoroughly. That was professional. He said I was putting my ego ahead of the company. I didn't respond. I just left his office. Within an hour, my entire team knew I'd resigned. I didn't tell them. Word just spread. By end of day, 5 of them had submitted their resignations. By the next morning, 4 more had quit. By Wednesday, all 12 engineers on my team had resigned. Most gave 2 weeks' notice. 3 gave 1 week because they'd already accepted offers elsewhere. Dataflow's entire core engineering team was leaving. Philip called an emergency meeting with me and Stephanie. He was furious. He said I'd orchestrated a mass exodus, and I'd turned my team against the company. I said I'd done nothing of the sort. I'd resigned because I disagreed with the direction. My team had made their own decisions. Stephanie said there was no way this was coincidence. 12 people don't quit simultaneously without coordination. I said 12 people quit simultaneously when they all reached the same conclusion about their work environment. Philip threatened legal action. He said I'd violated my employment agreement by poaching employees. I said I hadn't poached anyone. I hadn't even started looking for my next job yet. I certainly hadn't recruited my former team members. Philip demanded I convince them to stay, tell them I was wrong. Fix this. I said no, they'd made their decisions as adults. I wasn't going to manipulate them. Stephanie said this would destroy the company. Yeah, we were in the middle of major client implementations. We had commitments we couldn't meet without the engineering team. I said that was a leadership problem. They'd chosen to reorganize a team that was functioning extremely well. This was the consequence. The meeting ended badly. Philip was threatening lawsuits. Stephanie was talking about how she'd rebuild the team quickly. I didn't care anymore. I was done. My last 2 weeks at Dataflow was surreal. I documented everything I could. I tried to hand off knowledge to the few remaining engineers who hadn't been on my core team, but there was no one who understood the full system. My team had built everything. We knew every corner of the code base, every architectural decision, every integration point. The remaining engineers were competent, but they'd worked on different products. Yeah, they didn't know our core platform. Stephanie started hiring frantically. She brought in contractors. She reached out to recruiting agencies. She offered huge salaries to engineers at other companies. But she couldn't hire 12 experienced engineers in 2 weeks. And even if she could, they wouldn't know the code base. My team and I left on the same day. We'd coordinated our end dates without really planning to. It just made sense to leave together. We went out for drinks that last evening. It felt like a funeral and a celebration at the same time. Devon raised his glass and said we'd done something rare. We'd built technology we were proud of with people we actually liked. Whatever came next, we'd always have that. We all drank to that. I went home that night feeling empty, and I'd left a job I'd loved because leadership had made it impossible to stay. I'd inadvertently triggered a mass exodus that would probably cripple the company. I should have felt guilty. Part of me did, but mostly I just felt tired. The first 2 weeks of unemployment were disorienting. I'd defined myself by my work for so long that I didn't know what to do with unstructured time. I slept late. I avoided LinkedIn. I ignored messages from recruiters who'd heard about the Dataflow situation. I just needed space to figure out what I actually wanted. My former team members started a group chat. We'd share job leads, complain about interviews, support each other through the weird transition period. Raj was the first to land something, a senior engineering role at a startup building healthcare technology. Good salary, interesting problems. Maya got recruited by a company doing climate tech. She was excited about the mission. One by one, people found new roles. Everyone landed on their feet within 6 weeks. I was happy for them, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Then I got a call from a venture capital firm called Meridian Ventures. One of their partners, a woman named Angela, wanted to meet for coffee. I almost said no. I wasn't interested in being a VC, but Angela said she didn't want to recruit me. She wanted to discuss a business opportunity. We met at a cafe in Cambridge. Angela was direct. She said she'd been following the Dataflow situation. She'd talked to some of my former team members who were in her network. So she said what happened at Dataflow was a perfect example of how good engineering teams get destroyed by leadership that doesn't understand what makes them work. I said that was accurate. Angela asked if I'd ever considered starting my own company. I said I'd thought about it, but never seriously. I was an engineering manager, not a founder. Angela said that was exactly why I should consider it. The market was full of technical founders who could build products but couldn't build teams. I had the opposite skill set. She asked if I'd heard of the concept of a dev shop that only took on clients who valued long-term engineering excellence over short-term shipping velocity. I said that sounded nice, but probably wasn't commercially viable. Angela disagreed. Yeah, she said there was a massive market of growing companies who'd been burned by offshore development or cheap contractors. Companies who were finally ready to invest in quality engineering. They needed teams who could build things right, and they needed leaders who could manage those teams sustainably. That was my exact skill set. I thought about it for a week. Then I called Raj. I asked him if he was happy at his new job. He said it was fine, good people, interesting work, but it wasn't the same as our data flow team. I asked if he'd be interested in building something new, a consulting firm focused on high-quality engineering for growing companies. We'd bring on clients, build their products or platforms, do it the right way. Raj was quiet for a moment. Then he asked if I was serious. I said I was exploring it. Then I talked to a VC who thought it was viable. Raj said if I was building it, he was in. I called Maya next. Same conversation, same response. Within a week, I'd talked to all 12 of my former data flow engineers. 9 of them wanted in. The other 3 were happy in their new roles but wished me luck. Angela at Meridian was thrilled. She said she'd invest seed funding, $500,000 to get started, enough to cover salaries while we built the business. We formed an LLC called Catalyst Engineering. I was CEO. Raj was CTO. Maya led front end. Devon handled architecture. We spent the first month setting up infrastructure, building our website, creating our positioning. We weren't a typical dev shop. We were a premium engineering firm that embedded with clients to build complex technical systems. Yeah, we charged high rates because we delivered exceptional quality. Our pitch was simple. You can hire cheap contractors who'll ship fast and leave you with unmaintainable code, or you can hire us. We'll take longer and cost more, but what we build will actually work, and you'll be able to maintain and evolve it. We landed our first client in month 2, a healthcare startup that had been burned by an offshore development team. Their product was full of bugs. Their code base was a disaster. They hired us to rebuild everything. We spent 4 months building them a clean, well-architected platform. We documented everything. We trained their internal team. We set them up for long-term success. They were thrilled. They referred us to 2 other companies. By month 6, we had 4 clients and were generating $40,000 in monthly recurring revenue. By month 9, we'd hired 3 more engineers and were at $80,000 monthly. We were profitable, growing, building exactly the kind of company I'd always wished Dataflow had been. Meanwhile, I kept hearing stories about Dataflow through my network. It wasn't going well. Stephanie's emergency hires weren't working out. The code base was degrading. Client implementations were delayed. Several major customers were threatening to leave because features they'd been promised weren't being delivered. Dataflow's engineering team had grown to 20 people, but none of them understood the core platform the way my original team had. 6 months after we left, I heard Dataflow lost their biggest client, a financial services company that represented $12 million in annual revenue. The client had been promised a major platform upgrade. Dataflow couldn't deliver it. The new engineering team didn't understand the architecture well enough to make the necessary changes without breaking everything. The client got tired of delays and excuses. They switched to a competitor. $12 million. Gone. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt sad. That client relationship had been built by my team. We'd have delivered that upgrade easily, but we weren't there anymore because leadership had valued process over people. Dataflow's board forced Philip to let Stephanie go. The reorganization she'd championed had directly led to the engineering exodus that cost them their biggest client. Philip tried to spin it as a mutual decision, but everyone knew she'd been fired. I heard through a former colleague that Philip had tried to rehire some of my original team. He'd offered huge salary increases. Everyone said no. They were happy where they were, or in most cases, they were happy working with me at Catalyst. Catalyst kept growing. By the end of our first year, we had 12 clients and were doing close to $2 million in annual revenue. We were selective about who we worked with. We only took on clients who genuinely valued quality and were willing to invest in doing things right. We paid our engineers well. We gave them equity. We maintained the same culture we'd had at Dataflow. Sustainable schedules, trust, autonomy. People started reaching out to us. My engineers who'd heard about what we were building and wanted to be part of it. We grew to 25 employees by year 2. We moved into a real office. We formalized our practices, but we never lost what made us special. We were still a team that genuinely cared about each other and the work. I got an email from Philip 18 months after leaving Dataflow. He wanted to meet for coffee. He said he owed me an apology. I almost deleted it. But curiosity won. We met at the same cafe where I'd first talked to Angela from Meridian. Philip looked older, tired. He said he'd made a mistake. He should have trusted me, should have protected the team culture instead of bringing in someone who didn't understand it. He said losing the engineering team had cost Dataflow everything. The company was surviving but not growing. Or they'd lost market share. Their technology advantage had evaporated. He asked if there was any chance I'd consider coming back. He'd give me complete control, whatever equity I wanted, whatever salary I named. I said no. Philip looked surprised. He asked why. I said I'd built something better, something I owned, something that couldn't be taken away by leadership decisions I had no control over. Philip said he understood. Then he asked if Catalyst would consider a partnership. Maybe we could help rebuild Dataflow's platform. I said we were at capacity with existing clients. We couldn't take on new work. That was partially true. We were busy. But even if we'd had capacity, I wouldn't have worked with Dataflow. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Philip nodded. He said he was sorry for how things ended. Now he hoped there were no hard feelings. I said there weren't hard feelings, just lessons learned. We parted professionally. I never heard from him again. Catalyst continued thriving. By year 3, we were doing $5 million in revenue. We'd built a reputation as the go-to firm for companies that needed complex technical systems built right. We turned down more work than we accepted. We could afford to be selective. Several of our clients offered to acquire us. We said no every time. We liked being independent. Angela at Meridian had made an exceptional return on her investment. Her $500,000 seed round was now worth over $8 million based on our valuation. She told me I'd built exactly what she'd hoped for, a sustainable, profitable company that proved you could do excellent work while treating people well. Now, I hired 2 people who'd been part of the original Dataflow team before I'd joined. They'd left before I'd started and had been working at other companies. They said they'd heard about Catalyst's culture. They wanted to experience what we'd built. They fit in perfectly. Because our culture wasn't about specific people, it was about principles: trust, quality, sustainability. Those principles attracted the right people. Year 4, we were approached by a larger consulting firm about a merger. They wanted access to our talent and reputation. They offered $30 million. I called a company meeting, all 38 employees. I laid out the offer. I explained what it would mean. We'd become part of a bigger organization. We'd have more resources, but we'd also lose some autonomy. Then I asked the team to vote. A majority would decide. 37 people voted to stay independent. 1 abstained. We turned down the $30 million because what we'd built was worth more than money. It was worth the ability to work the way we believed work should be done. I still follow Dataflow occasionally. They're still in business. They've stabilized under new leadership. They hired a strong CTO who's slowly rebuilding the engineering culture. They'll probably be fine, but they'll never be what they could have been if they'd valued the team that built their success. That's the lesson I think about most. Companies don't succeed because of strategies or processes. They succeed because of people. And when you fail to value the people who built your success, you lose everything that made you successful. Dataflow lost $12 million when their biggest client left, but they'd already lost something more valuable. They'd lost the team that would have prevented that client from ever wanting to leave. Catalyst became successful because we never forgot that lesson. We built our entire company around valuing people, trusting them, supporting them, giving them ownership. And that approach turned out to be great business. My team didn't just quit with me because they were loyal. They quit because they recognized that the culture we'd built together was being destroyed. And they weren't willing to stay and watch that happen. When they joined Catalyst, they weren't following me. They were choosing to keep building the kind of workplace they believed in. That's the difference between a cult of personality and a real culture. A real culture survives transitions because it's based on principles, not people. Today, I have engineers on my team who never worked with me at Dataflow, but they thrive at Catalyst because they share the same values. We just hired our 50th employee, a brilliant systems engineer who turned down offers from 3 major tech companies to join us. I asked her why Catalyst. She said she'd spent 10 years in environments that treated engineers as resources to be optimized. She wanted to work somewhere that treated people as humans, building something meaningful together. That's what we built. That's what we'll keep building. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things ended at Dataflow. If I wish I'd fought harder to stay or done something differently. I don't, because leaving Dataflow led me to build something better. There's something that belongs to me and my team, something that can't be destroyed by one bad executive hire. Philip gave me a gift when he chose Stephanie's reorganization over the team that built his company. He freed me to discover what I was actually capable of. I wasn't just an engineering manager. I was someone who could build an entire company based on values I believed in. The $12 million Dataflow lost was their tuition for that lesson. Expensive, but some lessons cost that much. My team and I learned a different lesson, that our value wasn't tied to any single company. It was tied to our skills, our culture, and our willingness to build something new when the old thing broke. We built Catalyst, and it's worth far more than anything we left behind. If you've ever been betrayed at work, you're not alone. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to Office Revenge Hub for more powerful workplace revenge stories.